Now this is the easiest money you're gonna make. In your line of work, that's a godsend. I stared at the generic, nameless suit standing in front of me. He claimed that he worked for the CIA, even flashing his badge and all. It didn't matter to me whether or not I believed him. The only thing that mattered was the fact that he paid half up front, promising that the other half was to be paid out after the job was done. I'm part of a freelance mercenary group, modern-day soldiers of fortune. We've been hired by government agencies before, but mostly just ones in Africa and Southeast Asia. You can imagine the type of shit that we've been asked to pull off. Safe to say, ethics aren't our primary concern. Now, I'm not blatantly immoral. If someone offered us an exorbitant amount of money to oversee security for a human trafficking ring, I'd shoot them on the spot. But that's not to say that we're good people. Far from it. In fact, I don't expect you to feel sympathy for me. I just want to get my story out there. Something very strange is going on here. Something that we should probably all be worried about. The mission itself was presented as a simple one, but the circumstances surrounding it were more unusual. We're staging a raid on a fanatical religious cult in Montana. Real psychotic bunch, I remember the suit telling me. I couldn't have imagined a better compensation than the one that he was offering, so I listened intently. In all honesty, it was nearly enough to set my entire team up for retirement. Nevertheless, the whole situation unnerved me. We were caught completely off guard when they contacted us. Somehow, they found our email address on the dark web. I knew what we were doing was illegal, but they didn't seem to care. In fact, they never mentioned anything about our past crimes at all. In reality, they probably could have smoked us at any point. It didn't make a lot of sense why they chose not to, or why they chose not to approach us at all. I had my hunches, of course, most of them to do with the fact that we were entirely expendable and operated under the radar the best that we could. Obviously, we didn't do a good enough job. Whatever. It is what it is. We needed this paycheck. Our little operation couldn't last forever. I know it's not important for the job, but what's the purpose of this raid? These guys growing weed or something? I asked. The question came out snarkier than I intended it to. The suit grinned. I guess he had a sense of humor. Well, he began, I doubt you'll be telling anybody, so I suppose you might as well know. He seemed confident in that assumption, maybe a little bit too much so. These people stumbled upon something that they shouldn't have, he continued, and then they tried to hide it. Better not be something that's moments away from exploding, I said. The suit laughed this time. It's not so simple, Mr. What do you know about the existence of, extraterrestrial life? I raised my eyebrow. What the hell was he about to tell me? You're asking me if I believe in aliens? I responded. I took a second to consider it. Sure, why not? He went on to explain the real objective. It sounded absurd, but it was also coming from the horse's mouth. You tell me what I'm supposed to believe. Apparently, a UFO had crashed on a farm in southern Montana a few days ago. As luck would have it, the farm belonged to the Church of Blissful Ascension, the cult in question. Shortly after it landed, some cult members stumbled upon it, subsequently being ordered to drag it into the leader's farmhouse, which was quite literally a mansion. Not much was known about the leader, other than his epithet, which was the Divine Messenger. Yeah, that type of guy. In reality, the cult was just a front for the trafficking of various goods, which had brainwashed its members into doing a lot of the dirty work. The most interesting part of this was the UFO itself. It was allegedly about 12 feet wide, 3 feet in diameter, and shaped like a pill. Before it landed, it'd been moving erratically, seemingly teleporting short distances every few seconds or so. After it landed, some kind of dark green fluid began leaking out of it. Now, for the actual mansion, we simply had to go in and assist a team of SAC-SOG agents in wiping out every single member. No survivors, no witnesses, and no exceptions. What the CIA planned to do with the UFO afterwards was none of our business. Not that I really wanted to know. We didn't have much time to prepare for the raid, but it didn't sound like we needed it. We're dealing with amateurs, most likely just trigger-happy rednecks who couldn't strategize or aim worth shit. I suppose a raid wasn't the most apt way to describe the job. It seemed more like a slaughter than anything else. My team of 6 met up with the SAC-SOG team, also around 6, at a small underground complex used by the CIA for clandestine operations, located about 30 minutes away from the farm. There, we geared up, went over tactics, and were told to repeat the objective at hand. No witnesses, no survivors. After all that was said and done, we piled into a SWAT truck and drove off. We never worked with the CIA in the past, so we supposed that this was standard procedure. We suited up in black tactical gear provided by the agents themselves. This part was a bit odd to me. We had our own gear, stuff that we'd been using for the longest time. Both sets were nearly identical, but the agents still insisted that we use theirs. The atmosphere in the truck was also disconcerting. Maybe it was just in my head, but everybody seemed so stiff. The agents clutched their rifles with iron grips while staring blankly ahead. My team tried talking amongst ourselves, but every word just felt awkward. I just chalked it up to nerves, which didn't make any sense, because I'd never felt nerves like that before. After what felt like hours, we finally arrived, stopping some odd yards away from the farmhouse in order to remain undetected. We piled out, got into formation, and began. I was assigned to the furthest flank position, so I stayed back as everyone else moved ahead. The closest people in front of me were one of my guys and an agent. It didn't take long for the strangeness to amplify. I noticed that the agent was gradually moving slower and slower. Eventually, I caught up to him. Well, it was more like I was forced to catch up. If I'd been moving any slower, I would have stopped. This agent had ruined the entire formation without anybody at the front noticing. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked as I walked up beside him. Without answering my question, he handed me a small scrap of paper. I took a quick glance at it, seeing an address and a date and time written on it. "Meet me. Don't be late," he said, no inflection at all in his voice. "Do whatever you can to stay alive." As soon as he finished saying this, he sped up, reclaiming his original position. Obviously, that interaction was a cause for concern. I had to start wondering just what the hell I had gotten my team into. I seriously started considering calling it off right then and there, but before I knew it, bullets were flying. The agents at the front had taken out the 2 guards standing at the front entrance. Soon after, we blew the door down and stormed inside. The agents shot down a few more guards stationed at the front door before we started heading towards the basement. Once we got down there, 10 more guards or cultist members were waiting for us. As per the mission, I raised my rifle and prepared to fire. Unfortunately, I couldn't have prepared for what happened next. The agent at the front raised his fist, signaling for us to stop. Surprisingly, the guards didn't shoot us at all. In fact, they didn't even react. The agents began turning around before aiming their rifles at us. "There's been a change in plans." We'd been set up. That much was obvious. I didn't even have time to curse before shit went off the rails. I ducked, feverishly trying to avoid point-blank gunfire while firing off nearly blind retaliatory shots. I managed to stumble my way behind some cover, but not before having 2 bullets graze my cheek and thigh. I peeked out, seeing the cult guards with malicious grins across their faces, also shooting at my team, and my team only. Amidst the chaos, I could see Fazil, one of my men, rush an agent in an attempt to take him down to the ground. It was definitely a desperation move. but despite Fazil being subsequently larger than the agent, his takedown was stuffed, and he is subsequently thrown into a pillar. I could feel rage over me. I raised my rifle, aiming it at the agent's head, and fired. He didn't go down. My aim wasn't the issue. I could see the bullet drilling into the side of his helmet. The guy even flinched, but he didn't fall. Instead, he finished Fazil with a shot to the head and walked off. My mouth fell agape as I stared, backing up. I guess I was pretty rattled because I stopped paying attention to my surroundings. I felt myself bump into somebody before being spun around to see another agent staring at me. I thought about going for my knife, but before I could even make a move, the agent grabbed my arm and effortlessly judo slammed me into the ground. I'd been thrown before, but this was by far the most painful one that I'd ever experienced. It felt like I was being tossed by a gorilla, not by a man with a similar build than me. His strength was ridiculous. Once on the ground, he mounted me before raising a fist. I knew with every fiber in my being that a single punch would pulverize my entire skull. As I started preparing my soul for the afterlife, the agent hesitated. "Play dead," he whispered. His voice was a familiar one. He slammed his fist down inches away from my head and cracked the floor next to me before flipping my face down. "Don't move, no matter what happens," he whispered again. The pressure blanketing my body soon disappeared, and the ancient was getting up. I knew what he said, but I didn't want to listen. I wanted to help my team. I got them into this mess, so I was obligated to get them out. But I didn't move. I knew it was useless. The basement had gotten quiet. No more sounds of struggle. My team was dead, and it was entirely my fault. Moments later, somebody began talking, snapping me out of my self-pity session. "Geez, job well done, huh?" It didn't sound like one of the agents, so I assumed the voice belonged to the cult member. What the hell is going on? I thought to myself. Were they working together? Now, about the payment, his question was interrupted by gunfire. A brief bout of additional chaos followed as more bodies dropped to the floor. I counted about 10 in total. I guess they weren't working together after all. "All right, let's make this quick," one of the agents said. I had to wonder what he was talking about. What more did he need to do? I listened to the sound of scuffling boots as the agents went around doing something. I opened one of my eyes just a sliver, trying to make out what the hell was going on. I wish that I just kept it shut. I was lying right next to Ricardo, one of my team members, as I stared at his lifeless, bullet-ridden body. I wanted to scream. I forced myself to keep my mouth shut. I continued watching as the agents went around to every single body, both my team and the cult members, and injected some kind of dark green fluid into their veins. Soon enough, they got to me. I held my breath and laid stiff as I felt the needle go into my arm. Thankfully, the guy didn't check my pulse. I was losing my fucking mind at this point, not just because I was playing dead while some mystery fluid was being mixed into my bloodstream. It was the whole damn situation. If this hadn't been the worst day of my life, then it was certainly a contender. Afterwards, I heard the agents mumbling to each other. I couldn't make out much, but I did hear 12 hours being said quite a lot. 12 hours. 12 hours to what? After about 5 minutes, the agents finally left. I laid still for some time after that. I wasn't exactly looking forward to seeing what the agents had left behind, but I wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of this by wasting my time mourning. My entire body was in pain as I pulled myself up, trying not to look at the massacre around me. I took out the piece of paper that the one agent had given me. The address belonged to a motel in Billings, while the meeting time was in 10 hours. I stripped off all of my gear and made myself look as presentable as possible before getting the hell out of that farmhouse and trying to hitch a ride on a nearby road. A couple of hours and $200 later, somebody finally agreed to give me a ride. Luckily, Billings isn't too far from the farm, so I think that I'll be able to get to the motel in time. However, I'm not sure that I'm going to like whatever's waiting for me there. Making it to Billings took me longer than I expected it to. As it turns out, hitchhiking on a remote road during the middle of the night isn't the safest thing that you can do. Go figure, huh? It was fine though. Nothing I couldn't handle. With that said, my real problems were still ahead of me. I didn't quite remember what the agent who slipped me the paper looked like. When we met, they were already wearing gear. He was definitely white though, about 6 foot tall, fairly muscular built. Shouldn't be too difficult to spot. The paper also specified that he'd be in the lobby, so that was where I headed once I found the motel. Once again, I looked around. The place was nearly empty, with only 4 people sitting around. An older couple, a single woman, and a single man. He was white, tall, probably in his 30s, most likely who I was looking for. "Tell me you're the guy that I'm looking for," I said, approaching him. The man looked up at me, as his expression morphed into one of confusion. He shook his head. "I think you're mistaken, sir. I don't know what you mean." I muttered out something along the lines of, "My bad," before getting ready to walk away. But before I could, the man started chuckling. "Yep, this was the guy. You look so worried there," he said in between laughs. Jesus, that was funny. Safe to say, I was starting to get pissed off. "What the fuck is going on?" I asked. The agent wiped a tear from his eye as he calmed down before checking the time. 20 minutes left, he said. It was pretty obvious what he was talking about. Had it really been close to 12 hours? What the hell is going to happen in 20 minutes? The man grabbed his jacket and got up. "Nothing good. Follow me." "Follow you where? I'll kick your fucking ass if you don't tell me what is going on," I said, anger rising in my voice. "Right here, in the lobby." "That's not a bad idea. But how about you come up to my room and do it there instead," he responded. Before I could say anything else, he was already walking up the stairs. I followed close behind, nearly fuming at how shady he was acting. Once he opened the door to his room, I couldn't stop myself from lunging and grabbing his throat. But he didn't fight back. But at the same time, it didn't seem like he needed to. His neck felt inexplicably like a thick steel pipe. The harder I gripped, the harder it hurt my hand, and soon enough, I just let go. I stepped back, a dumbfounded expression on my face. The agent checked the time again. "You done now?" I didn't respond. He grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the mini fridge and poured out 2 big glasses, slid me one while he sat down at the same time. "I'd recommend you drink this quick," he said. I took a deep breath and calmed myself down. "What did you inject me with? What is going to happen to me?" I asked. "Well, you're gonna find out if you keep asking questions," he said. "And trust me, you really don't want to fucking find out." He opened the closet and unlocked the safe inside. He took out a briefcase, flipping it open to reveal 4 syringes. This time, they were filled with a blue liquid. "Drink up," he said, gesturing towards the liquid. "'Cause this is gonna hurt. If you think I'll let you inject me with something else, you're a fucking idiot. Tell me what the hell is going on now," I responded. He laughed obnoxiously. "You're calling me an idiot? The same guy who won't put enough trust in the government to take one of the most blatantly sketchy jobs of all time is calling me an idiot." "That's rich. You guys should have just jumped out of the fucking truck when you had the chance." I considered responding, but I bit my tongue instead. I really couldn't argue against that. It certainly wasn't my brightest idea. "Doesn't fucking matter," I finally said. "You still need to tell me what's going on." "Trust me, I will. But you need this first," he said, holding up one of the syringes. I shook my head. "No, what I need first is an explanation." The agent sighed, checking the time once again. 10 minutes, he said. "You really want to make this more painful than it needs to be?" "I guess so." I wasn't budging. Again, not one of my brightest moments. The man shrugged, sitting back down in his chair. So be it. We'll wait. That stern, confident face that I was putting on certainly didn't reflect how I was actually feeling at the moment. The agent had a stranglehold on me in just about every conceivable aspect. I hated that fact. I never could accept people having power over me. If I were a smarter man, I would have just listened. But here we are. 10 minutes passed and nothing happened. I nearly breathed a sigh of relief until I felt my arm start to twitch. I scratched at it only to feel my finger quite literally digging into my flesh. I looked down and nearly choked. It looked like my skin was rotting away, and it was spreading fast. So, the agent said, holding up the syringe. You want it now? Fuck it, I spat, catching it as he tossed it to me. The pain was starting to become unbearable. I stuck the needle in my vein and pumped the mystery fluid into my bloodstream. At that moment, the rot had completely consumed my forearm. It was horrifyingly disgusting to look at. In my mind, there was no fate worse than that shit that was spreading up the rest of my body. That's rapid necrosis right there, the agent said, and you just injected the antidote. I felt immense relief immediately after. I watched as the rot slowly crept back down my arm before disappearing completely. In that moment, a wave of euphoria washed over me. I'd never done heroin, but I imagined the sensation would be comparable. Enjoy that feeling, the agent continued, because the hard part is coming up soon. I didn't have to ask what he meant by that. It was just as the flip had suddenly been switched. The euphoria was immediately replaced with the most excruciating pain I'd ever experienced in my entire life, even worse than when the rot was consuming my arm. This is why I made you a drink, the agent went on. The pain will only last around 10 minutes. Try and keep it down, though. We don't need any noise complaints. Those 10 minutes seemed like 20 hours. If you were to ask me what exactly it was that I was feeling, it would have been hard for me to describe it. Hell, simply put. It was sheer hell. As if every molecule in my body was being tossed into an industrial meat grinder before the remnants were dropped into a molten lava. I laid on the ground for a few moments after it had passed. To tell you the truth, I wanted to lie there for a bit longer, but then I remembered where I was. I leapt up, rushing back at the agent. If I was pissed before, I was about to explode now. What the fuck was that? I screamed in his face, as I began trying to strangle him again. It was strange. His throat didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt like regular flesh. I could see his face starting to turn red, and I grinned. I was getting the upper hand. It seemed like the antidote had more than a few side effects, but that didn't last long. He grabbed my arm and elbowed me in the face, before somehow managing to reverse our positions and mount me. And from there, he put me in an arm lock. All right, he said. You got that out of your system? Because I can explain to you what the fuck is happening now. I tapped the floor, signaling yes. Well, all right, he said, letting go. We can finally make some progress. He pulled up a chair and sat down, still panting from our short grappling match. I did the same. Why'd you kill my team? I asked. If we told anybody about the UFO, nobody would even fucking believe us. Hell, why'd you even hire us in the first place? Slow down there, he said. One question at a time. The first thing you need to know is... Pause for a moment, almost as if an uncomfortable thought had crossed his mind. There was no UFO crash. No aliens. That was all fake. I buried my face in my hands, trying to wrap my head around what the hell he had just said. What? Before I continue, do you want that drink now? He asked. And I nodded. It seemed like I was gonna need it. If there was no UFO, then what was the point of the raid? It's simple, the agent said. to make it look like there was one. I'm not sure why I nodded. It's not like I understood what was going on in the slightest. Think about it, the agent continued. The CIA conducts a clandestine operation that involves covering up a UFO landing. It goes horribly wrong, and all the agents die. The agents? I said. My team were the ones that died. The agent nodded. Yeah. And what uniforms were they wearing? I thought back, and suddenly it made complete sense why they didn't want us wearing our own uniforms. SAC gear, I responded. But that still doesn't make any sense. Every agent should have been registered, right? We sure as hell weren't. That's right, the agent responded. But it doesn't matter. He gestured towards an empty syringe sitting on the table. Once the necrosis finishes, there wouldn't be nothing but bones left. Nothing left to identify. It's a real nasty concoction. Nothing left to try to identify. It's a real nasty concoction. Fair enough, I said. So the CIA backs a raid in order to conceal a potential UFO crash. The mission ends in disaster and everybody, including the cult members, die in an inexplicable way. The agent nodded. The aftermath yields a burning question. Who, or what, killed them? I sat back. The implication seemed so ridiculous it was comical. The aliens. The aliens liquefied everybody and escaped out into the world, I responded. The agent smirked. Now you're getting it. I don't think I am, I responded. How do hostile aliens running amok benefit the CIA in any capacity? The agent poured himself some more liquor. That part, I'll admit, is a bit complicated. And complicated it was. This is where his story veers off batshit territory. According to him, this whole debacle started years ago, with one man at the center of it all. Jonas Kane. To the best of everybody's knowledge, Kane was just a civilian, not a former SEAL or Ranger or anything to that effect. In the span of just 2 months, he managed to gain the favor of a sizable portion of the higher-ups at the CIA, effectively splitting the organization into factions. It didn't take long for his side to start overwhelming the other. Stating that he essentially held the CIA in the palm of his hand wouldn't have been a stretch. So how does a regular guy manage to do all this? Well, the why to that question was pretty obvious. The how was another story entirely. The antidote, the agent said, holding up another one of the blue syringes. I couldn't tell you the scientific name, so we just call it God Serum. Kane's claim to fame. I half scoffed, half chuckled. Read a lot of comics? Still a teenager at heart, he said. That's just my coping mechanism for all the atrocities I've committed, though. I couldn't tell if that was a joke or not. So Kane developed this serum by himself. The agent nodded. That's the way it seems. Well, what does it do exactly? Despite how dumb I thought the name was, it wasn't terribly inaccurate. On top of immediately healing any injury or disease, like necrosis, the user essentially ascended into a superhuman state. How strong somebody could become depended on their own genetics. Their base physical attributions could be enhanced 20-fold, at the minimum, all the way to a staggering 55. Slow twitch muscle strength, striking power, speed and endurance, durability, you name it. It was the super soldier serum on additional steroids, and from what I've seen so far, there haven't been any discernible negative side effects. Kane was also the one who knew how to make it, and he wasn't sharing his secrets. This gave him a stranglehold on just about the entire organization. Can't the CIA just force the recipe out of him? I asked. You know, advanced torture techniques or something? That's an option, yeah, the agent responded. But easier said than done. The upper limit of 55-fold enhancement only applies to the serum that he's giving us. Kane's different from the rest of us. He's on something else entirely. What I'm trying to say is, he's unstoppable, uncontrollable. Machine guns, snipers, explosives, tranquilizers, nothing does shit to him. If we're Captain America, he's fucking Superman. Nobody can force him to do anything. I shook my head. This sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Are you hearing yourself? I don't disagree. But as absurd as it sounds, it's the fucking truth. And isn't that what you wanted to know? The truth, the agent responded. Anyway, that's the how of this whole story. Kane wasn't a scientist either. Up until 2018, he was registered as a traffic court lawyer in Oklahoma. We don't know how the fuck he managed to do any of this, but the worst part of this whole situation is that we don't even know what he's trying to do, what his endgame is. The agent stood up, lit a cigarette, and began pacing. But it sure as hell probably isn't anything good, he said. Combine this with the fact that he's got most of the CIA wrapped around his thumb, and we have a disaster on our hands. He's gaining more and more influence by the day. If he continues to go unchecked, well, you get it, don't you? If the agent was telling the truth, and this was what indeed a nightmare scenario was, evil Superman as world dictator, forcing the world to believe we were being attacked by aliens for unknown reasons. What a bright future. So, what are you then? I asked. Leader of the anti-Kane faction or something? Not the leader, he said, shaking his head. Just one of many moles inside Kane's faction. But we all have the same goal. I'll do anything to take him down. Well, I said, standing up. Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you. Good luck. I'll be heading out now. I knew he probably wasn't going to let me just leave. I could tell that he was trying to recruit me for something from the get-go. But after hearing all of this, on top of my entire team being killed... Wait. I'd nearly forgotten about that. My team's dead, you know, I said, giving him a death stare. And you caused it. I don't give a fuck if you're a double agent or what. How the hell am I supposed to forgive that? I'm not asking you to forgive me, the agent responded. This is bigger than either of us. Bigger than anything that you can imagine. If Kane gets his way, I reckon your team would have been fucked regardless. You don't have to forgive me. All I'm asking is that you work with me for now. If we succeed, I don't give a fuck what happens next. You can strangle me in my sleep for all that I care. And he began stepping towards me. If you want your revenge, then you can have it. But there might not be a world for you to come back to. He extended his arm, implying that I shake his hand in agreement. Come on. You never dreamed about playing the hero when you were a kid? This might be your only chance. I swatted his hand away. What the hell do you want from me anyways? I responded. I can't even stop my team from dying. What good am I gonna be? And it finally came out. I didn't blame the agent. I really only had myself to blame. A tough pill for me to swallow. The agent paused for a moment. I couldn't even look him in the eye at this point. I knew that he'd be able to see the weakness behind my own. Eventually, he held out his arm again. If I thought that you weren't worth recruiting, then why the hell am I trying so hard? He asked. Come on. Make the death of your team worth something. Still not shaking your hand, I responded. Tell me the plan. You guys do have a plan, right? The agent grinned. Well, it's a work in progress. It's what? Instead of responding, he tossed me a jacket. I knew you'd say yes. Bundle up. We're heading over to Russia.